people now are realizing that there's better ways to work and there's no reason not to.
Why be chained to a desk?
Why be chained to a desk if that's not what fulfills you? And why work a 9 to 5 if you work better earlier or later or differently? Or we can't expect everyone to be productive and fulfilled in the same exact structure. That's very unrealistic. And right now we have all the tools and resources at our disposal to build careers that provide us with freedom, flexibility, ownership, make us feel more fulfilled and inspired and ultimately happier every day.
Welcome to the Sonder podcast. An epic story that continues invisibly around you, like an anthill sprawling deep underground with elaborate passageways to thousands of other lives. I'm your host, Alexander Robertson, and this is where strangers become stories.
Welcome to the Sonder podcast, where strangers become stories. I'm your host, Alexander Robertson, and I'm delighted to be joined here today by Erifili Gounari. Welcome,
Thank
Erifili.
you.
I'm going to have to refer to my notes now because your list of achievements are so long. So you're 24 years old, self-described, and are an entrepreneur and author based in London. You're one of the leading voices on all things Gen Z, which is really exciting as an aged millennial myself. You're the founder and CEO of the Z-Link, who are paving the way in regards to Gen Z marketing, which is so interesting because I think it's such an end of the market that's misunderstood. And there are not many definitive voices in it, which you are, and are becoming more and more prevalent in. And obviously this week you've just released your book, which is phenomenal.
Yesterday.
Got a hard copy here. Hopefully Erifili will sign it later. And you're also in the Forbes 30 under 30 in regards to media marketing and in their newest category, which is incredible. Well done.
Thank you.
So you've taken a very unconventional career path. You started your company when you're at university, I believe, which is extraordinary, and it is a success. How many people work for you now?
Now we're a team of 25.
Wow, which is pretty cool. Very cool. So today we'll be exploring Erifili's journey from founding her business at 20 while still at university and scaling it into a leading Gen Z marketing company. We'll also explore the role that a bias for action has played in her life, something that we have talked about and share. So such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us, Erifili.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to start with the early days and context. So can you share some memories from your childhood and upbringing that have shaped you and the sort of values that they instilled in you from maybe family or a cultural perspective?
When it comes to moments that broadly relate to who I am today, I can probably point out that my dad was very pro me exploring like digital tools and random things I had an interest in. My mom was always like, don't let her have like a laptop when she's 12 or however old I was. But my dad is very much like an early adopter, and so am I. And I think that encouragement played a big role in what I do today, which is of course so digital. I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and when I was in primary school, I don't know if that's year 4 or year 5.
I'm not very good at this.
Yeah. I was in primary school, and one of my hobbies was learning to create blogs and websites online. And back then, now you have tons of 10-year-olds doing that, but back then in Greece, it was just very niche. No one was really doing that.
I bet.
So I remember making a little blog and forum for my primary school class to share things online. And back then, everything was just really not digital in that sense, especially where I was growing up. So playing around like that, doing things for my school, for my friends, for myself, exploring a lot.
That leads me on to, has your Greek heritage shaped who you are today at all?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't know exactly the ways that it has, but as we were discussing before, maybe for useful context, since I grew up in a French educational system and not very much surrounded by Greek education or Greek friends, just my family was Greek, but all my friends were from all over, and the education system I followed was also very international and very focused on France and general culture. So I think maybe, I didn't have as much contact with Greek culture as you would expect, but I'd say that when I grew up in a Greek primary school when I was still very young, I really love the way that Greece still really embraces general culture where it comes to philosophy and literature and Greek mythology and sort of setting up the foundations that inform everything else that you learn and study later. So that part of it, I think, is kind of embedded in Greek culture, even if I can't see a very direct, link of me being in it.
Yeah, interesting. And from that age, did you think I'm going to be Erifili the entrepreneur?
Absolutely not.
What did you envision for yourself? Were you going to be an astronaut?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone around me did. I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I went to university to study art history because I just loved art. I loved history.
In Scotland, right?
Yeah, in Glasgow.
So was that a big change? Was it?
It was a big change, but it was a great change. I really liked it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But growing up, I don't think I ever had an interest in any very set career path. I never had I want to be that. And I knew the things I loved to do. I knew I loved writing, reading, playing around with digital tools, meeting people, talking to people. So those things naturally led me to think at different times in my life that I wanted to be like a journalist or an author. I mean, author was always one, so happy to be here.
Yeah, I think I wanted to be a tractor driver at that age, which was, great
That's a
thing.
good one
Tractors
for a
are still
little
great, I mean. So that in mind then, how did you get into it? Or what was your first entrepreneurial venture?
My first contact with the startup world, I'd say, was when I was 17 and I graduated high school. And I was like, okay, I need some work experience, as every high school graduate's like, okay, we need to find
Desperate
something to do.
have.
Yeah.
I think I worked in an estate agent.
Yeah, mine was less cool, but I ended up doing an internship, a little unpaid internship for this startup incubator in Athens, in Greece, for the summer before I went to university. And I didn't know what a startup incubator was, didn't know much about it, but then in there, I was helping them with social media marketing because that's the only thing I had experience in, and we can get into that later if you want. But I learned a lot about startups, VC, entrepreneurship in general. I met a lot of young founders. So I just found it very interesting, really, to learn about how startups work. I didn't think I would want to ever start my own at that point, but it was my first kind of contact.
I think it's so exhilarating when you're in that sort of sandbox environment, incubator environment, where you see people just out there doing things. We spoke earlier about, action bias and how it's just best to crack on with stuff. And I think when you observe it a lot as well, I don't know about you, but it really eggs me on to get to that.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, for the sake of our listeners and this aged millennial, what is Gen Z?
Gen Z is broadly defined as born after 1996. And now I don't know exactly where Gen Alpha starts, but I'd say the youngest Gen Zers are probably like 15, maybe? Yeah. So right now, people 15 to 27, 28-ish.
Okay, interesting. And what are the sort of traits? I know there's this term digital native. Obviously we spoke about dial-up. I don't think that probably necessarily associates with that. So what's the Gen Z take on that?
Yeah, I'd say the main trait and why, although no generation is a monolith and it's not useful to sort of think of them as such, I think one trait that is very definitive of Gen Z is this digital native upbringing where we're the first generation to grow up with this access to information and digital tools and resources that facilitate things, opportunities, skills, life paths that just weren't possible before. So I think maybe access defines Gen Z in that sense.
Interesting.
So yeah, I would say being a digital native sort of boils down to that.
Which is sort of a double-edged sword. I mean, that brings me on to my next question, which is, you started a business while you're still at university. Barriers with social media are very much shades of grey. They're not firmly defined anymore. So how did you manage your time? How did you carve out personal time, business time, and still get an amazing, degree?
The first 2 years were definitely a lot. When I started the Z-Link, I was doing my last year of university, my dissertation, applying for masters, doing the Z-Link, working a full-time job in Silicon Valley to fund the Z-Link because I didn't want investors. Studying for GMAT, learning math from scratch. We were talking about
we were
how
speaking
we're not
about
very
that.
quantitative. So I had to do that for my GMAT and stuff.
Yeah.
But I basically now figured that after trying a lot of productivity, time management methods, trying so many different things, as you can imagine, the main thing that works well for me and I realized that whenever I stop doing it and I start again, I'm like, wow, this is kind of a game changer, is for me, what just kind of, because I think we talked about both having ADHD and I find that it's hard to stick to things and focus, and a lot of productivity methods just don't click with you. So you have to find whatever clicks in your own little system. And for me, it's time blocking in my calendar and making sure that I have a slot marked down for every task I have to do. Because I find that when I don't, my mind keeps rushing to the other things I have to do. I jump between tasks a lot.
I know this feeling so well. I literally now block out time off when I know I have to relax. Like I've got a Fitbit, and most people, buy them to do more exercise. I've bought it to tell me when to stop exercising, because it's such a hyper fixator. One of the things I wanted to talk about today is I think there's a lot of misinformation about Gen Z, who they are. You get terms coined such as the lazy generation or whatever, something I don't agree with. And also one of the things that people say is, it's not a people generation. People don't interact and engage. I mean, you've scaled your business to 25 people, I think now. So there must be an element of people in your life. So how did that work, and who was your first employee? What was interesting about it?
So my first employee was, I think, someone that just reached out. I don't even remember now, but actually, I think it's useful to say that for the Z-Link, it helped a lot that I got people reaching out asking to work together from the start. They just liked what we were doing and they wanted to get involved somehow. So when I was able to start hiring people, I had a lot of people that already had expressed interest. And then my first sort of permanent employee was my sister.
Oh, good. Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
She's still working for
good.
Yeah.
So not too
It's
bad.
been 4 years. She's good.
Excellent.
Good hire. And it's funny. I think sometimes hiring people, if you know that they're reliable, especially at the start of a business, working with people you already know and you know their personality, you'll be able to rely on them, is very valuable. So she was sort of the first kind of more permanent hire, and she's still very much involved and has been very helpful. But for me, in general, people have been a huge part of this journey, and probably the best part also. Like the people I work with have been the most rewarding part of building the Z-Link and the people that I get to meet through it.
We did speak about this earlier, but I really do think that, the power of people is extraordinary, which is something that obviously you've incorporated into your business, do what you do. That integrity, that deep level of trust, that's one of the reasons that we started the RM Media Group and this podcast as well. So I'm so glad that we can dispel that misconception that Gen Z aren't people, because it's just not true. Now, talking of Gen Z, according to the current statistics, they're making up over about 30% of the world population.
So they say.
So obviously a huge market of which brands still, I don't think, fully understand, which you're obviously helping with, one case at a time with your company. But what do you think are the main mistakes that traditional big brands that are marketing to people are making in regards to Gen Z?
Yeah. Brands tend to look at marketing trends and Gen Z trends and preferences and try too hard and maybe very artificially to jump on things that they see resonating with Gen Z in a way that comes across as inauthentic and Gen Z considers, cringy, for lack of a better term. It's very easy for Gen Z to see when a brand has never spoken to a Gen Z person on their team. And I think the best thing they can do is to work with actually young people that are close to that and have that understanding. So I think, a mistake is just trying too hard for the sake of connecting with Gen Z, because you don't have to speak a Gen Z language or jump on every TikTok trend as a brand, but you just have to communicate your brand story and the impact you're trying to make in a way that's human and real. And at the core, that's what works best with Gen Z above any trend and any sort of slang term you can use on your brand TikTok. It's the way you communicate your brand story and the humanity behind the brand. And I think big brands especially forget about the human aspect. They have so many layers of approvals, very long processes to get marketing initiatives approved and put out in the world. And I think all of these things act as a barrier between them and Gen Z, because the more you can kind of let the human side behind a brand story show, the more it's going to resonate.
I think what's brilliant about that is how disruptive it is to the market, because historically you've had these big corporates, huge brands just selling one way, Whereas now, as we're seeing, everything is a two-way exchange, which is, I think, what's led you guys at the Z-Link to do a lot more market research as well. I believe you're doing a lot more of that. So bearing that in mind, what are the sort of trends we should be looking out with in regards to Gen Z?
Right now, I think, which is it's part of why we're doing a lot of market research in the career space. One, because of course Gen Z is now very much an early careers sort of demographic. A very big trend that I'm excited about personally is how Gen Z is reinventing and redefining the future of work and the way that we work. And that's come as a natural extension from the work we do as a marketing agency and the market research we do. And of course, my whole book area, you know, I didn't set out to go into this future of work / career space, but it just feels like so relevant to what Gen Z cares about right now. And as a larger trend, I think it's understanding that the way that we work is outdated and not very human, and trying to work in a way that's more human and understands that we're people and we need to love our everyday life and enjoy it, have a good time, you know, not
as we spoke about earlier, the little moments.
It is the little moments. And I think Gen Z is realizing that they don't want to wait until they're 70 to retire and have a good day.
Life's to be lived, and I couldn't agree with that more.
And now it's very much possible and accessible. So as a general trend, I think that's very important.
So in regards to that then, this is an interesting one I really was looking forward to asking you, because personal brand, it's a big thing. You know, I'm probably one of the only people I know that still wears a tie when I go to a business meeting, and people tell me it's outdated, but I really enjoy it, and I still think it makes an impact. So you also do a lot of public speaking. Obviously, you're a public figure now. So how do you go about personal branding?
Good question. I do love personal branding as a tool because I think it's led to all the most wonderful opportunities I've been able to access. I think a core part of building your personal brand, and maybe that's something that you will relate to as well, because based on what we talked about, I think a lot of people find personal branding kind of tricky to navigate because social media makes it seem like we have to fit ourselves into a single category where your personal brand will revolve around. And it's very difficult for a lot of people right now to choose like one niche, one category to fit themselves and their personal brand in. And that's one part that I think about a lot when I'm building my personal brand, is I tend to gravitate towards like being this or being that or talking just about this. And then it doesn't feel authentic to who I am because there's so many
You're fitting a social norm or a trend or whatever.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different areas that I'm equally passionate about when it comes to my work and the marketing and the careers and the writing and everything around that. I think the main sort of step to building a personal brand that's real and works in your favor is remembering that it doesn't have to be very niched down, no matter what people say about picking a niche. And your niche is just kind of who you are as a person. Yeah. And you can fit all those different elements into your personal brand. And that's the most, I think, rewarding thing.
But that's the wonderful thing, celebrating difference, people for who they are, and that disruptive element where we are. I think now people are having to listen to that more, which brings me nicely on to, it's been a very exciting week for you, hasn't it, Erifili?
Very exciting week.
Your book. And what's very nice to hear is that I think your motives behind this book is wanting to pass on to your generation, you know, things are changing and you need to embrace them. Yeah. So here's the advice that you pass on. So what are you trying to get across in this book?
I've learned so much in my own journey, and I think the most useful thing I could do was just put everything in a single piece of work. Down. Yeah, every time someone asks me, I want to work for myself, I want to enjoy my career more, but I don't know where to start, I can just be like, here's the book. But the gist of it is that, as we said before, Gen Z, and it's not just Gen Z, but I feel that that's a good starting point. People now are realizing that there's better ways to work, and there's no reason not to.
Why be chained to a desk?
Why be chained to a desk if that's not what fulfills you? And why work a 9 to 5 if you work better earlier or later or differently? Or we can't expect everyone to be productive and fulfilled in the same exact structure. That's very unrealistic. And right now we have all the tools and resources at our disposal to build careers that provide us with freedom, flexibility, ownership, make us feel more fulfilled and inspired and ultimately happier every day. My point with the book was to provide the most useful guidance possible to anyone that's sort of thinking of how to navigate that in their own career, using very actionable, practical tools, resources, steps, interviews with people that have done that very successfully in their own fields, and just helping anyone that wants to follow a more unconventional path and can see themselves working a 9 to 5 forever, but is not exactly sure how to go about it.
Yeah, which is something I'm truly behind. So if there was one takeaway that you want people to take from that book, what would it be?
It would be the bias for action part. So my main takeaway is that the most important skill you can cultivate is cultivating a bias for action and high agency. So learning to get things done. I think when it comes to careers, especially if you're crafting more of an independent career, learning to get things done without overthinking and favoring action over inaction, even when it's imperfect, will get you so far. And it doesn't matter how intelligent or how skilled you are or how anything else, because if you do it, I mean, Nike, I guess, said it first. Like, if you just do it, so many of the best and most rewarding things I've done in my career came from being like, oh, it would be cool if we had like a market research network. We should try to launch that. Doing it the next half hour. And then now it's, 20, 30,000 people.
Which is incredible.
And you don't have to, I think people that want to work for themselves or do something similar, but spend, 6 years thinking about it, that's the problem. You can't develop the skills, as many skills as you develop and people that you speak to. It's not going to get you there if you don't go from 0 to 1.
Yeah.
So I think going from 0 to 1 and doing it all the time and learning to be comfortable with that is the main takeaway.
Let's just do it. Which is something that I very much believe in. One of the reasons I guess we're sitting here today, because it's the extension of if you don't ask, you don't get. It's the actual physical embodiment of that. If you don't go for it, you're not ever going to get it. You might crash and burn, but you need to try. So this would be something nice to pass on to maybe some of the bigger corporates. But what are Gen Z looking for in their careers, and how can incumbent corporates cater to that better?
What comes up a lot is flexibility and options to grow and to work in ways that make sense for them. So I think Gen Z doesn't really see the point of fitting very tightly in strict structures that are inefficient or don't really make sense. Companies that measure performance based on output rather than input, for example. So based on the results you get and not how many hours you spend to get them.
Yeah.
Those types of flexible ways of working and growing within work are very important. So I think flexibility is incredibly important for Gen Z.
Yeah, I think, and that is great because it dispels this idea that just because you're sitting at a desk, you're being productive.
Which, of course, we all know is not the case.
Which I feel very strongly about, but we won't get into
that. It's not even, I think, contested anymore. But we don't, I don't think big corporate is
the place.
Not the place. I mean, for some people, I think it can be kind of the fulfilling career they want. But I don't think big corporate is. I think everyone in corporate knows that you can't be productive just by sitting at a desk always. But we still pretend that's the case. So like, why are we still?
Which is interesting because we went through COVID, of course, and people working from home, and it seems now the trend is everyone's going back to the office. And I'm wondering, is that always going to be the best thing? I think this hybrid working style seems quite interesting.
Well, interestingly enough, for Gen Z, I don't remember the percentage, but I think 90-something% want hybrid work. They don't want just remote, but most of them really don't want just office. But it feels like a lot of Gen Zers really also like the positives of working in person with people, which is very understandable because the human connection element at work is really fun and rewarding. So I think hybrid is probably a lot more of what the future holds for Gen Z.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that as well in the sense of it's so important to get together, incubate ideas, but does that mean you have to be at your desk all the time? Probably not. So you also have a podcast that you co-host where you discuss books over coffee. Yeah. I definitely don't need any more coffee today. But if you could give us a couple of books that you've discussed, just one professional, one personal, that you would highly recommend.
Okay, one professional. I'm going to go with a very... Oh, no. I was going to go with a very basic one, but no, actually. I'm going to go with The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which I don't know. Do you know him?
No, not yet.
He is the founder of AngelList. I don't think it's called AngelList anymore. He's a VC. He is very, very successful. The Almanac of Naval is basically a book that conveys his philosophy for life, work, and happiness. It's written by someone else, though. And I just find he has so much wisdom, and probably I feel like we think quite similarly. I think if you read it, you might just be nodding along and you're like, he gets it. He really gets life, work, happiness, the essence of it all. And I think it's someone that's very wise. And it's one of the few books I reread. And every time I reread it, I'm like, I should reread this more often.
Yeah.
You highlight so much. It's full of wisdom. And I think it integrates work and life very well. Great book. Genuinely recommend it to anyone that's interested in like anything like that. And then personal book recommendation. I go through phases. I really like. I'm gonna go for the one I recommended you earlier. I'm gonna go for Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, which is a book about Richard Feynman's life. He's a Nobel Prize winning physicist. Was a Nobel Prize winning physicist. He was involved in the Manhattan Project. Incredibly accomplished, offered a lot to society with his work. And it's one of my favorite biographies because the way he lived his life was so inspiring to read about, because he's someone that led with a lot of curiosity and a lot of kind of childlike wonder for the world, while at the same time being so incredibly accomplished and successful.
But not losing that joie de vivre.
Not at all. Exactly. Everything he did was very much like very full of that joyful life and whimsy, and he just led his life just by following his passion and his inspiration and momentum, and it's just very inspiring to read about someone like that.
Yeah. No, it sounds fantastic. So I'm definitely going to read that after your book, obviously.
Enjoy.
So, we've spoken about your entrepreneurial journey, and I was going to ask you, what traits or characteristics have been most crucial, but I think for you it's action bias that comes across very strongly. So maybe if you want to enlarge on that, please do, but also does that incorporate with any habits or routines that you have that really keep you in the zone?
Sure, yeah. Of course. I'm very much about my sister once said, and I thought it was funny, she said I'm a very specific person. It's like, what does that mean? But I get it. I think I'm very much about my habits and routines and like the things I know work for me. I'm big on meditation and journaling and writing as a way to becoming a clearer thinker. So I write a lot, and it's always made me feel like a much more structured thinker, and it helps with all areas of my life a lot, especially if you struggle with like an action bias or anything like that. Getting into, and everyone that's very successful always sort of goes back to writing. They all say that, and I think it's an interesting thing to notice. Writing for yourself or for anything makes you a much better problem solver. It can help you get things done a lot more easily because you overcome mental barriers. It just makes you, I think, smarter and a clearer thinker. And we don't do enough things to kind of help ourselves think better, So I do a lot of that. And then, of course, meditation always.
That's very good. I'm trying to work on meditation. I'm good with the yoga and the Pilates, but I haven't quite
I love Pilates.
calmed down enough to do the meditation yet. But
Reformer
maybe you can help me. Exactly.
Always.
Very addictive.
Yeah.
So you are a successful person, Erifili, at a very young age. So you're incredibly inspiring and a lovely person as well, which is great. So what is your definition of success?
I wrote a lot about defining success for yourself in the book, chapter 2.
What page?
Chapter 2, but I don't know what page. But it's probably my favorite chapter because it's the more kind of philosophical one. It's very theoretical, but I think it's so important. We don't really stop and define success for ourselves, especially I think in our early 20s or school, university years. And we think that going for more and more money or higher and higher position or whatever the next milestone is success. But first of all, when does it stop? And second of all, does that align with what makes you feel happy every day? Because we don't stop and consider that. And if your work is stressing you out every day, then I don't think you'd feel successful. So I think for me, thinking about all that and seeing how it applies to my career, I've realized that I just feel the happiest when I have control and freedom over my time and freedom to choose what I get to do in a wide sense. So spending time with the people I love, being able to travel, being able to treat the people around me, Being able to have slow mornings, so important for me. Not being in a rush and being like constrained by something. I think, being able to slow down and have freedom to choose what I do is my definition of success.
I'm so glad that you speak about that, because that's something I've experienced myself. You know, things on paper can all be a great success, and people externally look at you and think, wow, what a great success. But does that mean you're happy? Not necessarily.
And are you successful if you're not happy? I'm not
exactly.
sure.
So you've got to balance it. And for me as well, a lot of that is agency, freedom, being able to do what you want.
Yeah.
So that leads me on to, what are the core values that instruct the way you live your life professionally and personally?
That's a great question. And I'd love to hear yours as well. But I'd say my top values are curiosity, and I sort of link that with openness, which is maybe another value, but it's very similar. I love to approach everything with a lot of curiosity and openness to learn from everyone and everything. And that's why I love anything that relates to connecting with others and meeting people. And I find also that, you know, when you're doing business and you're in sales, that kind of boils down just wanting to talk to people genuinely. Like, it's not sales, it's I want to hear from you.
I want to connect.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's a good thing to have, like, because it's very genuine, and that's how you build beautiful connections. And so I love just always being a curious person, and I value learning a lot. Another one is optimism in general. I really think that pessimism and cynicism are easy, and I think optimism is a choice. And I value being around people that make a choice to be hopeful and not kind of get. I don't like the kind of mantra that goes, people are too smart to be happy. I love people that choose optimism intentionally and kind of live my life like that as well. So these are, I think optimism, curiosity, openness, and then a lot of other smaller things, but I think these things sort of permeate my everyday life a lot.
I think our values align completely. You know, we spoke about earlier when we first met that, you know, the power of people. And it sounds very smushy or whatever, but I genuinely believe in the power of people. You can have the worst day ever, and a 2-minute interaction with a great person who's optimistic, wonderful,
Of course.
changes your day or your life. And, you know, life isn't easy, as we all know, but I do think I like to get up in the morning and try and be positive. It's the small moments, the great things, like doing this, you know, it's so exciting. So this leads us on to the Sonder signature questions, which we love asking people. So what is your go-to place, habit, or person when you need to recharge, or you're maybe a little upset, or you want to get some perspective?
Place, I have two. Anywhere in nature, and it's a random one, but Florence in Italy, because
Beautiful.
I lived in Florence when I was 19 and I worked there for a little bit, and I just really connected with it for some reason and ended up going back a lot anytime I was stressed.
Well, as an art historian.
Yeah, it was the art history in me, but whenever I was stressed or overwhelmed by work, I would just escape to Florence. And now it's just kind of my recharge place where I feel very comfortable just going by myself and
Grounded.
chilling. Yeah, I feel very grounded there. It's funny. And anywhere in nature. And then in terms of activity, when I need to recharge, as I mentioned before, for all those reasons, it's writing, always. I always know it's going to put me in a better mood.
Very cathartic.
Very cathartic, even if I'm not feeling like it. I know I'll write and feel better, always. And then person, my sister, brings me a lot of perspective. We're very, very close. I'm not going to tell her I mentioned her in this. I'm going to boost her ego. But I feel like when I need perspective, she's the best person to go to for like a very grounding, very honest conversation. It's very good to have someone like that.
With that deep trust.
Yeah, and like be completely yourself, no barriers. I think, I really appreciate that.
No, I think that's, we spoke about it earlier, but I have the same relationship with my brother.
Really? Is he younger?
Younger by 2 years.
Yeah, same,
and
younger by 2 years.
We can't tell him this, anyone, but he gives me so much clarity. He tells me how it is, but in the best way.
Exactly,
which is just very special.
And you know, growing up, you have your parents being like, you need to be best friends. When you grow up, you're only going to have each other. And we were like, no.
No, But then it's turned out that we
and now
are.
you're like, wait a second.
No, absolutely. So, Sonder, which is what this podcast is all about, is the theory that everyone's living their own vivid story like a sort of movie. So, you know, what character do you play in life? Are you a villain? Are you a hero? Are you a leader? Or, you know?
Um, I think when you mentioned these to me earlier, you mentioned magician, and I was thinking about it. And I think I don't really feel like the hero, but I do kind of feel like a magician because I think I'm good at getting things done in a way that I'm
Kazam.
often like, yeah, I'm like, I'll do some magic,
Yeah.
things get done. And once you just do it enough times, then you're like, I can do things, and that kind of makes you feel like
very empowering.
you can do magic things.
And magic is a real thing, in my view.
Magic is a real thing. That's why we're out here
Sprinkle of it.
doing things we love. So I think I'll have to go with magician.
Now, if you were to ask our next guest a question, what would it be?
It would be maybe very basic, but you talked to some great people, so I'd say, what's a piece of advice that genuinely changed their life? I mean, I want to hear what impacts people that are themselves creating an impact. You know?
Yeah.
I want to
People
know
who are
what
leaders,
helps them and what drives them.
I mean, it was interesting because Howard Angus MB sat here a few weeks ago, and we asked him that question, and he's a world champion of 2 sports. He's been given MB by the Queen Elizabeth II. And I said, well, what are you? Expecting him to say leader. And he said, I am not a leader, which was extraordinary. But to end on that note then, is there a piece of advice that someone's given you that stuck with you?
Yes. One that just comes up now is my dad said when I was on the verge of making a very difficult decision that you owe yourself a life well lived. He really tried to instill that in me. And I think that's impactful because leading like that reminds you that you have to give yourself a life well lived and a life that you enjoy.
Yeah.
It's kind of your responsibility and your ultimate goal to enjoy your life, right? And I think remembering that you have the agency to create that for yourself.
I think that's really a great point because I think I realised at one point in my life, as someone who loves living life and the joie de vivre of life is very important to me, is that actually the only person in control of your happiness, to a degree, obviously lots of things can happen to someone, but it's your choice if you want to be positive, you want to be happy. I think the power of that is huge.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you so much, Erifili, for coming today on Sonder. It's been fabulous to have you. And I just could go on and on talking.
Thank you. Great chat. Great questions.
Before you sign this book, I must tell everyone, please do check out Erifili's book, Design Your Life, Your Career, Your Way.
That's me in the flesh with shorter hair, but still.
Anyway, we look forward to you tuning in next time. Thank you very much, listeners.
Thank you.